Contractor's Guide to Job Skills. I'm going to give you the top 10 job skills that are in demand this year, 2024. So number 10 is Internet of Things. An Internet of Things engineer. So you've probably heard about home automation, stuff in like telling your Nest device or your Amazon device to switch lights on and off. That's pretty much all I use Amazon for. I'm sure it does other stuff as well, but yeah, switch this on, switch this off, change the color to blue and that sort of thing. That's just one, it's just lights, right? There's lots of other automation. You can have locks, you can have window blinds, turning the TV on and off and all that sort of stuff. And that whole thing, that whole subject is kind of Internet of Things. It's things that you can attach to the internet and how they can be controlled. And, can they be controlled by you or me or just the person that has control of the controlly thing? Controlly things. Some of this can go quite low level into like ZB protocols and things like that, as well as perhaps even designing the hardware. So quite a lot of knowledge, maybe some assembly, some C language creeping in there, because these are small, custom devices and they need to be small and cheap and quick. So let's move on to number 9. Business Intelligence Analyst. What the heck does that mean? Well, there's a thing called business intelligence. This is where the managers want to look at the data or the data and understand stuff about their business or the business customers, or maybe both. So a lot of this role is about getting a request in for a report. So a manager will say, I want to know how many widgets we sold over the last year. Can you break it down per month? And then there's probably a load of other stuff that they really want, but they're not going to tell you about because they haven't thought of it yet. So you need to go off and firstly generate the report. But firstly, you need data. So you'll need to understand where the data needs to come from first. Is there a number of distributed databases that hold that information in order to pull that report together? Or is it all in one database? If it is, then you're very lucky. It makes it quite simple. But a lot of the time, it's mixing and matching various bits of databases and datas all over the place into one single report that's easy enough for everyone to understand. Business Intelligence Analyst. Number 8. UI and UX Designers. I love UI and UX Designers. And I'm sure you can tell me about certain UI and UX, that's user interface and user experience, which is done badly. My bugbear, I suppose, would be Amazon's web console. It doesn't seem to be great, but then I don't have any great ideas on how to make it better. Use the command line instead, maybe. But when there is a great user experience, it just seems so easy and intuitive about how to get stuff done. We can tell when user experience is really good because we don't whinge about it. And the same for the user interface. There is this fun project where it will try and design the worst user interface it can possibly imagine. Like when you click into a box and then you try and type something and another box appears and your words are in there instead, It's really confusing and kerfuddling. And so we can all agree that having a great user experience is important for friction-free purchases. And UI is important because, if it looks pretty and it's easy to spot where you're going, then it makes using it very easy. Number 7. Number 7 is project or product manager. And these are important. They inform that bridge between the engineers and a massive pile of stuff that needs to be done and the focus of what's most important. and also the direction if there's anything contentious. The customer says they want a thing, and the project or project manager can then either ask the customer, well, can you give us a bit more detail about the thing? Or perhaps they've been dealing with that customer for a long time and they can already interpret some of the answers that you're going to ask as an engineer. And so the engineers will go, right, you don't want a bright pink one, you want it in the company colours, because of course you do. Even though the spec you gave us was bright pink. Obvious things like that can just be smoothed over. And so the project manager provides focus, direction, prioritizes all that stuff into do this, so that we can at least get on with the most important thing first and share with us what the customer actually wants, as opposed to what the customer says they want, which is usually number 6. Software developer. Of course, everyone loves software developers. Some of you might even be software developers. And they do the codes. I did touch on this before. Internet of Things needs software developers, probably developing in lower level languages like C or even machine code. More often, we're talking about front end and back end. So web front ends, maybe Ruby on Rails or JavaScript. One of those many front ends that we've got now, like React and things. Or maybe it's working on the back end stuff where you'll need a little bit more knowledge around databases, perhaps, and asynchronous code, business buses, passing messages, and all that kind of thing. There's a lot of stuff going in there. But here we are, number 6, software developer. Next up, 5. We're into the top 5 now, guys. Cloud Solution Architect. Now, I must admit, I struggled a little bit as to try and work out how to describe this. Most people know what the cloud is, and I'm not talking about the fluffy things in the sky. I'm talking about the cloud providers, where you just borrow someone's server and they charge you a monthly fee for it, or even hourly if you're lucky. And why do we want stuff in the cloud? Well, because at a small scale, it can be cheaper. And if you're actually scaling your app, what I mean by that is not just the app itself, because production is always required. What about the back-end systems, the developer systems? Those don't need to be up all the time. We can switch them off at weekends. And so the cloud solution architect will come up with a solution not only where the customer gets what they want and it works in the cloud, but they also consider the cost implications of that and provide cost-saving measures in their design where appropriate. We want to minimize the cost, but maximize the functionality to the end customer. 4. Networks. Never far away networks, always been there. Whether it's talking about your ADSL line that comes into your house, maybe you've got fiber. So everything's getting faster and faster. So we've got the remote working aspect. But how does that get into the corporate network? How can we make that secure? How about all those firewall configurations? Maybe we've not got just an on-premises that we're plugging into, but we're also plugged into the cloud. So how does the cloud interact with the on-premises, remote working, and how that all comes together and in a safe and secure way? So networks, understanding network traffic, performance of network traffic is also important, and IPv4 and IPv6, maybe talking about routers and wireless routers, being in offices, that sort of fun stuff. So number 4, networking. Number 3, AI engineer. Who didn't think that AI was going to be in here somewhere? Here it is. An AI engineer. What does that mean, though? Well, it's a software developer who knows even more stuff. Specifically, I've got TensorFlow and PyTorch in there. They're both Python, as it happens. AI does get done in other stuff as well, but Python seems to be quite popular, certainly at the moment. And we also get involved in large language models, LLM, and generative AI, which tends to be pictures or video, like that. And so an AI engineer understands what these technologies do, they understand what a neural network is, they understand how to train a neural network, creating models, and ultimately using those models in order to create something useful at the other end, whether it's a chatbot or leveraging it into something else. Number 2, data scientist. Kind of like AI. But if we mash AI together with the business intelligence, remember that role I mentioned right at the beginning, where you're creating reports for management? Well, let's use AI to create the report. Easier said than done, but that's what a data scientist does. They understand where all that data is for the reports, and then we can apply some statistical analysis and things like that to it, store the data in a Hadoop or a data lake, and then use machine learning in order to spot patterns in that data. So we're not talking about simple sales data now. We're talking about, I guess the best example is Netflix recommendations. Because you liked this movie and this movie and this TV series, we're going to suggest to you a different type of program based on what you've watched and based on what other people have watched and they also said they liked. We can mash that all together. The data scientist gets all that together so that we can actually have that suggestion at the end. That's just one example. There's lots of data, lots of ways of pulling it together, lots of ways of finding patterns in that data. I know that one online retailer was monitoring what people bought, and it would then suggest what else you might want to buy. And it was so good at this, it could detect when their customers were pregnant before their customer knew they were pregnant based on what they were buying. So crazy patterns like that. Very exciting field. But number 1, security. Specifically, cyber security analyst. So this is all about keeping the data safe, as I might have said on numerous presentations before. Not only is it about keeping the data safe, it's about people and keeping them safe, keeping the right people in and the right people out. So it's talking about threat detections, whether the email is scanned for viruses or phishing, that kind of thing. Penetration testing. Can the bad actors actually get into your organization, whether that's through networks, which we mentioned before, or even physically in person? I was talking to somebody yesterday, actually, who was talking about physical entry into a building, and they were talking about one specific company where they just couldn't get in at all. And that's because everybody that worked in that company was very friendly and worked with their community. Everybody knew everybody else at the company. So as soon as a stranger walked in, it's like a scene out of The Invaders where everyone's just pointing at them going, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And so they didn't get very far. And I think what I'm trying to say is we just need to look after each other, look out for each other, and as a community, we can reinforce our own safety in numbers. And then there's this cybersecurity stuff as well. But if we look after each other as well, then we'll be even safer. So I hope that list has been lovely. Before I close out, I'm going to talk about contractors. So I am a contractor, and I believe that contracting is the best thing since sliced bread, as they say. No more worry about getting made redundant when you're in charge of your own stuff. But being a contractor gives you choices. It gives you choices about compliance, contracts, and cash flow. When we're talking about cash flow, it can be, when do you get paid? It's your choice. When do you take holiday? And when do you save for your retirement? Choices also means compliance. This is where we have to make sure that stuff is registered and reported upon. Those business intelligence reports coming through again, right? Collecting that data, maybe it's your accounts, then the compliance report then goes off to HMRC. And choices with cash flow, because cash flow is even more important, with the invoices, making sure that's done right, and the recording of the accounting and the tax. And I might have mentioned it before, but when is your payday? So if you want to know more about contracting and how we can help, we got a little quiz for you to fill in, and that will tell you how well you are suited to being a contractor and whether you're ready or not. So I hope to see you on that quiz. And if you've got any questions, bung them in the comments below, and I will answer them for you. Until next time, I shall see you very soon. Stay safe.